Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech, and today we're going to be talking about Patchwork scales in Pioneer. I'm very excited to bring this list to you. As always, before we hop into the video, let me know in the comment section below what you think about the list at the end of the video. Is there any card that I definitely should have included that I did not? As well as if you have any suggestions for upcoming videos, just let me know in the comment section below. So, alright, Patchwork scales. So, I've had this deck for quite some time, honestly. There's just been, it's been a pretty hectic release schedule, you know, like Lost Caverns came out, then I had some really sweet budget decks I wanted to post, so, you know, Patchwork scales just kind of kept getting pushed back and back, and for some reason, a lot of the scales, like 1/1 counter decks, really, a lot of people don't really like those on here for some reason. I think these decks are very, very cool, and a while ago, I wish I remembered who, but someone had asked me to do a true artifact aggro deck, and I was like thinking, you know, Steel Shaper, or not Steel Shaper, but Steel Overseer, and I'm like, you know what, let's definitely do an artifact deck, and then we ended up doing a scales deck, which is very, very cool. So let's go and hop into it here. So as our early drops, we're playing 4 Stonecoil Serpent, 4 Hangerback Walker, and 4 Iron Apprentice. So Stonecoil Serpent, definitely a very popular card in the format. It just does so much, you know, reach, trample, protection from multicolored, enters with X1/1 counters, fantastic card. Hangerback Walker is very, very good in this deck. Enters with X1/1 counters. When it dies, put a 1/1 Thopter into play for each counter on Hangerback Walker, and then 1 in tap, put a +1/+1 counter on Hangerback Walker. Definitely a very, very good card, and we'll kind of see why this card's so powerful with some of the cards coming up later in the video. Iron Apprentice is also just a pretty solid card, 1/1 for essentially 1, because it enters with a 1/1 counter on it. Then when it dies, if it had counters on it, put those counters on target creature you control, which definitely has a lot of synergy for sure in this deck, which we'll go and hop into the next slide here. So next card, these next couple cards are 2 drops, which I personally think is the heart of the deck. So we're playing 4 Patchwork Automaton, very, very good card from Kamigawa, 1/1 for 2 with Ward 2. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Patchwork Automaton. Just obviously fantastic. We're playing a ton of different artifact cards in our deck, so essentially it's whenever we cast an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And spoiler alert, we're playing a bunch of 1/1 counter doublers, so we're going to be getting 2, maybe 3 +1/+1 counters on it every time we cast one. So Patchwork definitely gets very, very big, very, very fast. We're also playing 4 copies of Steel Overseer. I love this card. This card was really, really good back in the day in the Modern Affinity decks. Hasn't seen a lot of play in Pioneer, but I think this card still has a lot of potential. 1/1 for 2. Tap, put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact creature you control, which guess what? We're playing a ton of artifact creatures, so this card is definitely going to put in some work. If our opponent doesn't, you know, kill this very, very early, it's going to take over the game very, very, very quickly. And then we're also playing 3 Metallic Mimic. You know, it's a pretty common card, especially featured on the channel here. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, and it becomes the chosen type in addition to its other types. And then each creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, which we're pretty much going to name Construct every time because most of the creatures in our deck are constructs. Like the only one that's really not is like Stonecoil Serpent. It's like a snake something, or even maybe just a snake. So other than that, all of our creatures are constructs pretty much, so we're going to get a ton of value from Metallic Mimic, so definitely a big fan of it. But that's why we're only playing 3 copies, because, you know, it's not the best card in the deck, but it's still very, very strong. So all right, next slide here is I would say kind of what kind of holds it together. I don't want to say like the bread per se, but it's kind of what, you know, the buns kind of holds it together a little bit. We're playing 1 Scroll of Defector Might. It's just a really good artifact creature, which obviously synergizes with our deck. The relevant ability is the one on the bottom where it's a white Phyrexian tap. Choose a color. Another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. So kind of like a weird Mother of Ruins for Pioneer. It's just a good card in general. I really, really like Skrelv. Just a strong card overall. We're also playing 3 Ingenious Smith, 1/1 for 2. When it enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. Whenever 1 or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Ingenious Smith. It only triggers once each turn, but it doesn't even matter because this card gets really, really big. It kind of reminds me of Patchwork Automaton. You know, you play an artifact, boom, it's a 2/2. Play another one, boom, it's a 3/3. This card just gets really out of hand really, really fast. So definitely a big fan of Ingenious Smith. Then we're going to need some protection spells because there's a ton of removal in the format. And Snakeskin Veil is my personal favorite just because it puts a +1/+1 counter on the creature, which obviously we're playing some 1/1 counter doublers, and then we give it hexproof, which is just good. So definitely a big fan of Snakeskin Veil. And our next slide here is pretty much the heart of the deck. We're playing 4 Hardened Scales and 2 Ozolith, the Shattered Spire, as our +1/+1 counter. I say doublers, but you know, the first one's a doubler and the next one just adds an additional one. But these cards are very, very good in the deck. Ideally, you want to have a Hardened Scales on turn 1 to really have the deck get going. Ozolith's also great because it triggers like Patchwork Automaton and the Ingenious Smith. We can get it off the Ingenious Smith. And then also, if we, have an extra one or we really don't need it, we can cycle it and then draw a card, or also put +1/+1 counters on it already if we've got some extra mana. So it's just a fantastic card in general, one of the most underrated cards from March of the Machine in general. So this is pretty much our last slide, except we've got one more thing we need to talk about, and that's these 2 cards. The Ozolith, we're playing 2 copies of that, and then we're playing 2 copies of Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So Ozolith is definitely very, very good in the deck just because if a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. So for instance, if we have like a 4/4 Hangerback Walker and we tap it and sacrifice it, those 4 counters get moved to there, and then at the beginning of combat, we can put them on another creature, which is just an extremely good rate. And then Agatha's Soul Cauldron is also very, very good because it kind of doubles as like Graveyard Hate, but the main reason it's really good is because creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So if one of our Steel Overseers or something dies, or our Hangerback Walkers, guess what? That means all of our cards can become like, for instance, Hangerback Walker, and tap, put a +1/+1 counter on it, or Steel Overseer, where you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact creature you control. It's an extremely, extremely good card, but it is an extremely good card, but unfortunately, that means the cards are very, very expensive. Ozoliths go for $30 a piece, and Agatha's Soul Cauldrons go for $45 a piece. They're definitely very, very pricey. They are not 100% needed for the deck. There's definitely a couple cards you could substitute for them, which we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later in the video, but these cards, while they're extremely powerful, are not 100% necessary for the deck. I just kind of wanted to mention that. So that's our entire main board, but don't go anywhere. We still have to talk about our lands sideboard as well as some budget options. So obviously we're playing Selesnya, so we're going to need 4 Razorverge Thicket, 4 Branch Off Pathway, and 4 Temple Garden as our main dual lands of the format. We're also playing 1 Boseiju, 1 Aganjo, and 1 Karn's Bastion as like our flex lands. Boseiju and Aganjo are pretty self-explanatory. Karn's Bastion I'm a very big fan of because if we happen to have some extra mana, we can tap 4 and proliferate, which means pretty much all of our creatures with 1/1 counters on them get an additional counter. And then if we also have Hardened Scales, that means they get 2 +1/+1 counters. So definitely just a good one of flex land. And then rounding out our lands, we're playing 2 Mutavaults and 2 Lair of the Hydras. Obviously just really, really good man lands. Why wouldn't we play them? And then we are just playing 1 basic forest in the deck. And as the spicy basic land of the day, I decided to do the original Mirrodin Forest by John Avon, just because, we got a lot of artifacts from Mirrodin. It's kind of on theme with our deck here. And that art is just fantastic. Huge, huge fan of John Avon's art in general. So, okay, that's our entire main board, but we still have to talk about our sideboard here. It's pretty simple overall. We're going to want some Graveyard Hate. Cards like Tormod's Crypt and Soul Guide Lantern are very, very good. I also really like Scavenging Ooze just because it works well with all of our +1/+1 counter shenanigans like Hardened Scales, because whenever we eat a creature from the graveyard, we'll get 2 +1/+1 counters, which is pretty sweet. We're definitely going to want some extra removal. Cards like Portable Hole is really great because it gets rid of our opponent's early drops, as well as we're able to get it with Ingenious Smith. So definitely a big fan of that. You could also play the Duskrose Reliquary. That card's also very, very good, and it's an artifact. And I also really like Damping Sphere and Deafening Silence. Damping Sphere, those mono green decks are pesky still. Even with Karn being banned, they're still very good, as well as Lotus Combo. So definitely a big fan of Damping Sphere in the sideboard. And once again, it's an artifact, so it synergizes with our deck. And then Deafening Silence as well is very good, just because the decks that try to play a lot of non-creatures in one turn, like again, Lotus Combo and Is It Phoenix, it's very, very good against them. If you'd like to know my exact sideboard, it's in the description below. The link is, and you can check out my exact 75. But don't be afraid to change things up a little bit depending on your local metagame. So, all right, last thing here, budget options. Obviously, cut the Ozolith and the Cauldron if you don't want to spend that much money on just 4 cards, which I completely understand. You could definitely substitute them with quite a few things. You could do like Botanical Brawler, or the Centaur guy, which I'm really forgetting right now, and it's going to bug me for sure because I've talked about the card 1,000 times. But really, any of the green-white creatures that give additional counters are both definitely very good options for that. You can also cut the utility lands like the Aganjos, the Lair of the Hydras, the Beseiju, the Mutavaults. If you just play pretty much just like some basics and then some dual lands you got lying around, that would definitely work. But the biggest way I would say that you could have a budget version of this is just plain mono green. You still have the Hardened Scales, you still have the Ozolith. Pretty much the white is really just for the Ingenious Smith and the Skrelv. Just play mono green and just a whole bunch of forests, and you could easily have this deck very, very cheap overall. So that is what I would do if you're looking to play a budget option of this deck overall. So that's the end of the video. I'd like to thank everybody for watching this video. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about the list? Is there a card that I forgot to include? Is there a super spicy artifact that definitely should have been in the deck? Just let me know in the comment section below. So I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.